On agenda tonight, Sam Turton, Paul Moulton, Bernard Moffatt and me, Phil Gawne, take an irreverent look back over the year just gone and look forward to the year to come. Will a great light appear in the darkness? Don't get your hopes up.
I suppose the year has been memorable most for being unmemorable, other than the fact that a number of people resigned during the course of it from prominent positions, both within the political side of the establishment and the administrative side. So I suppose they are some of the big events. And when you look back on the year, if you went out on the street now to do a vox pop and said to people what was in the budget last year, most people would have completely forgotten what was there, because it's been overshadowed by this internalising that goes on. And I mean, I notice this in the media. I'm always happy to criticise the media, and great, there's two of them here at the moment, and yourself, to get it right in the teeth. The fact is, the media indulge the personality of politicians too much at the present time. They're always planting themselves in front of Paul's camera or your microphones, when in actual fact they're doing nothing really of substance. And that's what the year amounts to, nothing really of substance. So sorry to start on a negative note, but I'm always negative.
So maybe a challenge for the next year would be for you to come in and take over from my seat. I'll operate the knobs and dials for you.
Now don't be petulant, that's Paul's rule.
and then maybe you could ask some of these tough questions. Paul, you're a pussycat, Bernard says.
Yeah, well, I love Bernard. You know, he gives me this hard.
Now,
he gives me a hard time when he writes things up, but I like it because he does it sort of tongue in cheek. But it's good to have reaction to stuff, and we were having a chat before this about politics in general, and you just don't get the numbers at all. People aren't engaging as much as they should be.
I think that's a really good point. And Paul's been at this game for probably, from the media perspective, a lot longer than a lot of people. Even when Charles Gard duffed him up at
it's still the most talked about video of all time.
Moulton.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things Charles actually complimented you on was the output that you've had. And a lot of that output is political. And I mean, if you're getting these vibes from the public and from what you see politically, I would take that as 100% position of where we're at the present time, which is look, joking aside, I know it's difficult for the media because this is a small pond and you depend on access to these people. I know people in this radio station, not working here now, but from years ago, who were actually blanked by some politicians. So it's a difficult balance you've got to strike. Fortunately, I don't have to strike that balance, so I give it to them in the teeth.
The thing is, you get numbers these days. It's an online interview. Obviously, radio is slightly different, but you get your radio job on that. But I, each year, talk to the politicians, the MHKs. I ask them in for an interview. I would do one on the year just gone and the year that's coming up. And I can't, well, someone's going to work it out now, but I haven't had a response from a fair few this year. And I've given up almost now asking. I mean, if they want to do these interviews, they want to do it. But why wouldn't a politician want to tell me and the public what they've done and what they're going to do? So we've got the usual suspects that will come to me straight away. And I'm grateful because, I can't make anyone do it. And as I said, I've got to the point now, I've asked everyone a few times. But why wouldn't a politician come in front of anybody, their electorate, and talk to us? And it just really annoys me now. That's how I'm feeling. I'm feeling that things aren't well here at all. The way things are going is not good. Sorry.
And sadly, one of the guests that was due to join us was unable to due to illness, Alistair Ramsey. Alistair had a really good, I felt anyway, article about this recently, in which he basically was saying that Tynwald seems to have lost its way a bit and forgotten that its role is actually to scrutinise what's going on and hold government to account. Jeff the Mongoose is Sam Turton. I nearly called you Jeff. Well, I did.
Yeah.
Okay, I called you Jeff. Sam Turton.
Hi, Jeff.
It's all over his logoed up as usual when he goes anywhere. Big signs.
Jeff seems to be quite cool, so all the politicians want to love you, don't they?
well, until we do something that involves them and putting them in bizarre situations or pictures, then they tend not to. Although this week's Bill Henderson on a tank seemed to have gone down quite well. Yeah, I don't know. I think Mr. Moffatt in the corner there is right, that realistically
Call
this...
me Bernard.
Grumpy old man. He likes that one.
I think he's right. It has been a bit of there's not a year that you can pick a lot of highlights out of. There was obviously the fortnight of the long knives came from the Dr. Ranson tribunal. That was really the start of the year, and that's still the main sort of the big thing that you can remember. Honestly, I was when you said about the budget, I can't remember what was in the budget.
Okay, let's be sarcastic. We haven't quite got the ribbon cutting of the promenade, but you could say that's exciting. It's finally finished, although it's not. But I've been, they DOI say, the minister says it's done, but then you look, there's temporary bus stops that are going to probably sit there for another year or so.
Which, if you look at it carefully, is actually helping by leaving a rust ring on the very nice new cobbles that they put down. Or
Is that finished? Is that problem finished? No one's been run over by a roundel or the zebra crossings that aren't zebra crossings yet.
And are we going to hear the happy sound of horses' hooves trotting the full length of the promenade in a year?
Maybe if they escape.
Coming shortly.
And that is a point in itself. That and what colour a postbox in Onken should be got more MHKs going bleating to the, and I use that word bleating, to the media because it's a good one. Let's all put our hands up. Right, but where were they, or where are they with the Dr. Ranson situation?
They seem fixated. You're dead right. They seem fixated on local politics and home in on it. And it's almost as if MHKs now are fighting the next election already by appealing to their constituency base. Going back to what Sam said, it's not as if there's not issues around. There's been loads of issues. I mean, there's the green agenda, what's going to happen with Kroger out there, and so on. I mean, how support has gone from government coffers, and who, most importantly, are the people who've derived benefit from it. All these are big issues. They're big key issues which the media should be sort of inquiring into. But it can only inquire if there's somebody there to answer its questions. I mean, it's unfortunate that, as I christened him, Doug Stamper, Alistair Ramsey was formerly a government insider, couldn't have been here, because he's written some really incisive commentary during the course of the year for Isle of Man Today, which is where I pick it up from. But certainly there's been one or two articles on Jeff as well, but they're not engaging, and there's a reason for that. They're either fighting the election, or most of the executive, the Council of Ministers, seem to be keeping their head down. They don't seem like a cohesive Council of Ministers for a start. Do you see them that way? You're a former minister, after all.
Well, it would be wrong of me to comment. I'm here just to present the programme.
An honest broker.
But yeah, maybe you've got you have a point. Perhaps one of the reasons that politicians are less eager to engage with the media is because social media is now a thing. And Bernard, I mean, you're probably the leader of the keyboard warriors in terms of your output,
No, interactively, I'd say Isle of Man News and Politics is probably the main site. I mean, that encourages people to interact with it, and it's a good site as far as I'm aware. You've got Crown Dependency News then that covers all the dependencies and further afield, so you get an idea of what's going on elsewhere. You can sort of take a litmus test of what politics is like in similar jurisdictions. The stuff I do for the most part is either critical of Paul. No,
we love each other.
It's analysis of what I see in the news here, and that's probably why I'm often critical. That's probably why I was getting sort of horrified looks as I walked through Manx Radio today. I must go to Brazil next year and have some of that surgery you can get.
Can I just come in here? Look, Bernie,
of course
you challenge, you engage, you have a comment to make, and not necessarily people want to hear these comments. You have to remember that, because it's too easy just to say the world is flat. These aren't the droids you're looking for, and people move on. Whatever.
You don't
engage.
think the world is flat?
You know me. You engage, and I love that. And there's not enough of it. But you're going to ruffle some feathers.
And isn't that part of the problem, that politicians can engage directly with their electorate now through social media?
Right. Yeah.
They don't have to have that encumbrance, Sam, of a journalist asking them the awkward questions, because all they have to do is post what they want people to hear.
They want access to you. I bet you don't have any problem filling up perspective or agenda with politicians. They want access to you, and they want access to that newsroom down below, to a certain extent as well, to what I call the cupboards of news, Energy, 3F and the BBC. They want that access, but they want to control the message, and that's not always a good thing. It really cheeses me off, by the way. You mentioned about social media. They whine all the time about social media, and then when you go on social media, who's there? MHKs. I mean, Alf's all over bloody Twitter,
Actually, to be fair, that was the thing I was going to say, is that you get the thing of where you have MHKs are going on a lot more on social media, and yet are amongst the first to say you get some very nasty comments on social media. What I find really interesting is, away from Twitter, the Manx are probably the only people in the world who will troll MHKs using their own names, because a lot of it is done on Facebook. Manx Twitter isn't a massive sort of thing. You get Laurie Hooper and Chris Thomas spend many an evening talking to each other on Twitter, whether other people are engaged with them or not. They just seem to enjoy it. But aside from that, you don't really get a lot of discourse, I find, at least looking at it on Twitter. You sort of get some unnamed accounts that do it, but most of it is on Facebook, which I find really interesting. But I think ultimately, the biggest thing is that when it comes down to this is a lot easier for politicians to manage. It's a lot easier, and the media does have a problem here in that real-time politics playing out on social media is difficult for all of us to play with, because it's very difficult for us to manage and present things as we want them. Ultimately, all media wants people to read their stuff. That's what part of it is, and how we do that is a challenge for us. But ultimately, politicians also, I think it's an easier game for them going on social media, because they don't necessarily have. They can just stop looking at it. They can just walk off. If you have a minister in here and they just suddenly walk off halfway through, you're going to sit there and go, well, what are you doing? You can't just go off and make a cup of coffee. Sit down.
It would make for an exciting radio show, certainly. And actually, Bernard, you made the point that they'd be queuing up to come and join me on my programmes. There are certain MHKs that I know, if I pick up the phone and ask them to come on a show, they'll come on the show. There are others, same as Paul, that I ask and I ask and I ask, and I never in many occasions don't even get the courtesy of a reply. So if people are concerned about hearing the same voices week in, week out, that's because those are the ones who are prepared to talk.
Okay, let's make this clear. If they've got a good news story, they'll be all over you like a rash. If it's something tricky, you get I'll do the interview, but don't ask me about X or Y. And I always go, I'm sorry, that's exactly what I will be asking you. You can answer it how you like, but I won't do that question. Now, there are people that will actually engage on that level, which is outrageous. You should never give in a list of your questions beforehand, because that's what it's coming down to. These are the questions I will answer. I won't take number 4 and 8. They're off. And if people do that, if any journalist does that, then they're in the wrong job, in my view.
Yeah. Strangely, they engage, I seem to hear it occasionally, on the likes of the Man in Line. They seem to like that. But having said that, and no disrespect to the Man in Line, which I give a lot of stick to as well. I mean, I was opposed to it being taken off some years ago. Really, because the government didn't like it. I mean, that's how bad media was then. The Man in Line disappeared or was chopped down to 1 day a week, I think.
A government official was paid to listen to the Man in Line. I know that's a fact. Yeah. Someone down there in the office had to write down anything that the government was getting hassle about.
They like that, but it's mainly talking to a segment of audience that's the same people, from what I here, that's coming in. But they do seem to like that, and that's quite interesting, because they seem to abhor popular social media, and yet they enjoy populism in an environment where they, I assume, think they've got more control. But, I mean, going back to what you said earlier on, I think it's the important thing, is what's been memorable. And I can't think of anything that's been memorable. Certainly, if you cast your mind back, even as far back as before the Walker government, back to Dr. Mann, you can think of significant events that occurred in given years. I don't think that this last year past will be one of them, you know.
Well, I disagree totally. I mean, Dr. Ranson issue is and you mentioned it already, is by far the biggest thing that the Isle of Man has had to deal with, and it's not over. And I have lived with this all year. I feel sick at what has come out. I feel absolutely what is going on when they looked into one little part of government and found what they found. How does that reflect on all these other people? And I know there's great civil servants, and I really feel sorry for them who are doing a fantastic job. But when you see what happened, and yet no one was actually dismissed. I mean, they all were just given their letter of resignation or, you know, to go off into the sunset. This is not right.
It's not that simple, though. I mean, I'm talking now from the point of view of a trade union official. And if I was representing people who were in the frame, if you want to put it that way, for the ransom thing, I'd be doing me damnedest for them. I went into disciplinaries when I was a union official, knowing very well that the person or persons I was representing might be as guilty as hell, but I was going to do a job for them. And, you know, without blowing my own trumpet, I usually could carry the day. And it's most difficult to carry out a disciplinary, not just in the public sector, but in the private sector, because there's industrial relations law and there's the complications that go with that. So it's often easier to get people to say, I'll write a letter of resignation, you say I've done a great job while I've been here, and we'll try and draw a line under it. I know that doesn't gel with the public, but that's the realities.
Potentially, none of this may have got into the public domain if they didn't have such a team. I mean, having the husband as a QC or now
yes,
whatever.
I heard all your interviews with Chris Robertshaw on this. I followed it in detail.
Because it could have just gone like so many other things. You know, a bit of tape over your mouth, there's a check, off you go. Right? This has gone much further. And now we're recording this before transmission in the sense of the X-poll is still waiting for that. I mean, what that will show, who knows?
I don't think it's that memorable now, though. I mean...
Well,
you may think so.
Sam, you're allowing, maybe out of
Phil
respect,
jumps into it, stop the fight.
You're out of respect. You're allowing the more senior members of the
two
panel,
grumpy old men,
to have the footholds forth. But actually, maybe this is something that Alf Cannon needs to take some credit for. Maybe he wouldn't publicly want to do this, but the fact that he has, or somehow, a manipulation behind the scenes has occurred that has resulted in so many senior chief executives, senior officers in government deciding that they would be happy to resign and spend more time in their gardens. Is that not a memorable thing of this year?
Well, it's arguably memorable, and I think there's still elements of that which are still being played out. But I think, you know, Birdie says about when he was a union rep, but you would have expected when you went into that room for all the facts to be on the table for a start, you would have expected all the documentation there. We have pretty much...
I could tell you things that would make your hair stand on end.
But we have it, you know, we've got it from the tribunal itself saying that the government did not disclose documents during all this process. We have various things that are still ongoing, like this X-poll investigation, which could still affect ministers who are in post now, around when documents were allegedly created. I mean, there's a lot with that, which... So whilst, again,
I've been round the block a few times. The Isle of Man government's been cruddy round the edge for years. Right back before Phil Gawne was there as a minister. There were often situations that, you know, questionable practices went on and so on. So I don't see anything. I know this was dramatic because it was played out against the background of everything that had gone on in COVID and the fact that the island, first of all, had got a tremendous amount of positive publicity, and then that just went whoosh, down the drain in an instant, if you like. And there's no doubt that lady was treated very badly, and you wonder whether others as well, people who were pressured and so on. But I don't know. I don't think. Well, you fellas were saying it before. I take as gospel what I hear the media saying. You were saying it before that if it's the bins issue or the horse trams or something like that, people are more interested in that. And I think you're probably right. Or how soon we'll get a few more sleepers for the Ramsey Pier or whatever.
One bit of politics, perhaps, that has been attracting public interest, and I'm amazed that you don't think this is memorable, is Chief Minister deciding to appoint a minister and then within 2 months deciding to sack the minister, and the quite extraordinary events that took place in the November Tynwald when the urgent question was put down by Tim Glover, where the Chief Minister was asked a question by a minister who is, or a former minister I should say, whose integrity is brought into question by this whole ransom affair, and the Chief Minister then lavished praise on that minister, which then resulted in the sacked minister getting really quite upset that apparently the person who had to resign because of a question over his integrity, what does that say about the integrity of the minister that's just been sacked?
Well,
and it all seemed quite bizarre.
It was bizarre, but is it? I mean, ultimately, and I don't want to damage any egos here, it was good political theatre, but there wasn't. Nothing major's changed. We've still got the situation where a minister was appointed and then sacked. We still haven't really got to the bottom of that. There's a back and forth of what went on with members of the department. And again, you're stuck at a point of, well, there's 3 different versions of this story at this point. So there's going to be an investigation into that. This is ongoing with the Standards Committee. We'll see how that goes. But again, I think it was political theatre, but not really. If you ask the average person in the street what happened that day, they'll probably be able to say that Rob Carlson got sacked as health minister after refusing to resign.
They may not even know who the chief, the health minister is. I mean, if you go down the street, how many people know? If you hold pictures up of all the cabinet, who would they actually know who they are?
I did that once, and it was not. I did that. For
I'm looking forward to this Isle of Man TV exclusive. This has got to be done.
But you know what I mean? I'm back to the engagement, isn't it?
Most people just worry about.
Most people just worried about what they're getting that night for tea, and how much money's in their pay packet. Obviously.
Well, yeah. I mean, I don't. Let's try and find. I'm going to find a positive thing that's happened this year, which I think actually was quite memorable. Was if we go back into the spring when Putin invaded Ukraine, and the island sort of we started decorating things in blue and yellow, but then from that you had this service in Villiers Square. And at that, we also had the thing of where we've got to over 100 Ukrainians have been welcomed onto the island, and I think that was largely driven by the Cabinet Office, Kate Lord-Brennan as minister in there, and this really small team who started looking at things and going, they put a system together that worked, and Manx people opened it up. And I think that is probably for me actually the most memorable thing that's happened this year.
Sorry, where were the Syrians? They weren't allowed in, were they? There's a whole thing. It's okay for Ukrainians.
I agree with you on that.
So there's a double standard going on there.
I do agree with you on that, right. But ultimately, different government, different times.
Well,
and we've now got a situation where
Daphne Kay may disagree with you because she still wants it more.
Well, until the last election came around and didn't want to talk about it.
Really?
But you said that.
Paul's
now then.
No, I didn't.
Paul's
just make that clear. I did not ask that.
You're dead right. Much as I don't want to agree with you, it actually shows up the hypocrisy of the situation. I mean, it's not just that, and. Fair play to them. I support the idea of bringing Ukrainian refugees here and doing what we can to assist, albeit that in the great scheme of things is not a large contribution. It's well worth doing. But we didn't do it over Syria. And coming back to what's happening today, we're still assisting the RAF to train pilots who bomb Yemen, So it's hypocrisy as far as I'm concerned. Alf Cannon didn't want to answer John Wannenberg's question about that, but he was quite happy to bask in the adulation of the fact that Daphne had managed eventually to persuade them to allow some refugees in from Ukraine. So I agree 100% with Paul that will be memorable, but memorable for hypocrisy. Sorry, Sam.
Well, let's go. I mean, we've been saying that we need, it's the bread and butter issues that attract people's attention.
Pensioners.
So one of the memorable things, of course, has been of the year is the loss of the ability of Manx people to go out into Manx shops and buy Manx bread. If you know which shops to go to, you can get some excellent stuff from Ross Bakery and Knorr Bakehouse, but the end of mass-produced bread on the Isle of Man. I mean, if that's not bad enough, driving a stake through the heart of Manx society, the loss of Ramsay Bakery's pasty slice. I mean, where do we go from?
The government didn't precipitate that. I mean, the bakery as a business decided to make this decision, which they're perfectly entitled to do. But this plays to the narrative that governments, not just the Alf Cannon one, but governments successively for decades have pandered to the Chamber of Commerce, more hate figures for me, and the business community generally. But the business community only looks after itself, and you're right to focus on the bread issue and so on. But in actual fact, that was a commercial decision they made, and the government had to decide whether they leapt in and tried to salvage something. I think they found that they couldn't do it in the way that I recall some years ago when I was first in the union, the decision was made to modernise Laxey flour mills so there would be a staple product to supply the bread industry here. There was much more sort of interest in that at the time and island food security, despite all the blather in the former administration when Jeff Booth was minister and now with Claire Barber. I haven't seen them do a heck of a lot to stimulate local production of foodstuffs. It seems to me that the agricultural sector are always fighting to try and get support. That doesn't gel well with the public either, because the public, if you mention farmers, they're about as popular as dogs are to postmen. But in actual fact, we need the farming industry, and I think one of the people who's done a fair job of highlighting the difficulties that they face is Alf Soppo in Aaron Michael, who seems to have a good head on his shoulders, and you don't often hear me say that about a politician.
I'm sure Tim Johnson would be delighted to hear that. And I did love the way that you started off by saying this is nothing to do with government, and then turned it all the way around to say actually government should be involved.
Yeah, well, you got the choice. Do you nationalise it? Then you look at the meat plant. I mean, that's a massive damning report, was that not? I mean, I did interviews with the last lot they're in, who were meant to be better than the previous ones before that. That's when we were still getting interviews. I don't think I got an invite for any interviews now on this one. I mean, clearly, it was pretty damning from all accounts. They've had another change of ownership, but it is a government thing. And I talked to farmers who literally could not believe how bad this had got. But most wouldn't want to go on camera because they would upset somebody and they wouldn't get their meat processed properly, or their animals. Yeah, again, another report, another change. But will we be talking about this again in a few years' time?
And are these not memorable things that are happening?
We're going through them, aren't we? We're talking.
Yeah, yes, but we began, or my guests began by saying that it was an unmemorable year.
But I suppose one thing you can say is that if you look at this is how much has the government been in control of any of this narrative? Has it actually set out to do something and go, and this is what we're going to do this year? And there's been none of that, really. So this is all events. The Ramsay Bakery, it would be a memorable thing that it shut down. Wasn't a government decision. Just happened to them.
I get the impression Alf is a bit like me. I used to go in the union office in the morning, plant me feet on the desk and shout tea into the other room in the days when you could do that sort of thing to your secretary and it wasn't regarded as non-PC. And then you took the day from there. You wonder actually how Alf fills his day when he isn't jetting off to the Gulf or South Africa or was it Brussels or something? I don't know. It's what's the government doing? You used to get did my head in. But Paul, every couple of weeks, would have Alan Bell sitting in or whoever, giving him a breakdown of what the government had done over the month or the 2-week period. That kind of faded away when Howard Quayle came.
Howard didn't really want to engage.
No,
not as much. No.
That was obvious, and I don't see it the same with Alf. Although I believe Alf is on the man in line tomorrow, so he's obviously willing to engage with somebody. You'll have to get him in. Well, you're losing your charm.
No, to be fair, I've always got Alf whenever, and he's. We don't go through comms for Alf because if you go through comms, you might well be stuck in repositions, for some time because they've got to make phone calls. And you the same? We saw him recently and he said, "Call me if you want me. Call me." And he can't do better than that. That's going straight to the top. I find him very engaging, to be honest, and he will answer. He may say the world's flat and these are not the droids you're looking for, but he will give you an answer.
I suppose if I was going to be kind and season of goodwill and all that, why not? Let's give it a try. We're here, the three wise men and Phil. The guiding star.
We've got a tinsel up, yeah.
But I suppose if you're going to be kind, you could say there was a lot that this administration has had to pick up from the last administration, and there seems to be quite a lot of foundation laying, almost, in the first 18 months of this government.
This is turning into a good cop, bad cop routine between me and you. You're the good cop.
Well, let's see where we get to. But
I'm just bad. The cops would abhor me describing myself as a cop.
But I suppose if we're going to be we could, maybe there have been foundations laid and things. But admittedly, from speaking to people, you probably shouldn't speak to over coffee in the morning sometimes, they have the same sort of thing where the government has sort of lost its momentum. And that's reflected by Tim Mull as well, which, when was the last time you can remember
it's more risk averse than ever. But then you, being the champion of freedom of information, they're now always worried about everything. He goes off to... the chief goes to somewhere, but now they actually release the numbers up front, don't they? Because they got so fed up with you
it's not
going in for the FOIs.
But it's not as entertaining now because I can't actually remember where that website is where it all gets published. Right. But you used to get itemised things. So if you remember, the famous one was a certain MHK going off to, I think it was the Falkland Islands for a trip.
You're talking about aspirin gate.
And you were able to break down, he got aspirin, he got tissues, he had a bit of a runny nose that week so you can see what it was.
Come on, anybody could have a headache. I bet you pair have been hungover a few times.
Charging it to the bill. That was the whole thing. It came out in his FOI.
Wasn't it? Well, it's the whole point is that you used to be able to FOI the stuff which was entertaining.
Having been a union official, I'm not going to criticise anybody and their expense.
What's the best thing you ever charging expenses?
This is going down a really weird rabbit hole now.
It is, isn't it? Let's stick with the positives. I'm going to join the good cop side and... I attended.
Well, I'm sorry I'm sorry to disappoint you.
No, you're doing a great job.
I'm sorry to disappoint you, but when Alf Cannon was appointed Chief Minister, despite the fact that I masked it well, I thought, this guy's got potential. I think he still has, if he keeps his nerve, and most importantly, if he has a look round that table at the shower he's got with him and decides it's time to throw the cards in the air here. Maybe he should watch a few episodes of House of Cards, because then he might get a team. Because at the end of the day, effective chief minister is down to the team that he's got.
And the plan. And, I actually sat through the full 2 days of the government conference down at the Villa Marina. And I know, but it's clear that government at least has a well thought out strategy, which is a good thing. It's not unique to this government, but it's
you've only got a deck of cards to play with, and you know from your time there, right? There's only so many people to fill those slots, and he's clearly struggling. When the latest sort of going back and forth, and Mr. Hooper goes back into health again, but still keeps the other one on. It seems to me like he's struggling to find people suitable to join the club. But he has advisors,
surely. He has
but you have to have MHKs as head of, don't you?
I know I'm a big head, but Bernie Moffatt, union official, blah, blah, blah. Behind me, there were a group of people banging me on the shoulder, very frequently saying, no, don't do that. Let's have a think about this, and so on. I would hope that Alf Cannon has advisors I don't mean political advisors. I mean in his executive. I mean
Spiritual.
he hold that what's his name, Coldrick fella with him from the Treasury. So he must have confidence in him. But he must have advisors and things like you referred to before, that business with slotting Rob Collister into DHSC and then finding he didn't appear to gel with the others, or they didn't gel with him, or whatever. That should have been predicted, and it's not down to Cannon. It's down to whoever was sort of leaning on his shoulder at the time and saying, this might be a good move. I take your point. It's a limited pool to work, but there's people in there with talent. I mean, I think being bullish and to the fore and willing to express a view, best person you've got in the Keys at the moment is probably Claire Christian. Now, I don't particularly like her that much because she's always banging on about the Chamber of Commerce and business and so on. But politically, she's got a bit of a go in her, a bit of zip in her. And, I mean, some of the current Comyn are the living dead, to be perfectly honest.
Okay. Let me have a second here on this one. You're talking about the Sir Humphreys running the thing, right? Now, they're the people behind the MHKs.
You're telling me to shut up now.
Yeah,
I knew this would happen.
Because you're just hogging everything. And poor old Sam's looking there. He's not going to get a word.
Just as well Alistair didn't turn
Oh,
up,
I know,
because we
but
would never have had space for him.
You know, sorry, Phil, look at you. When you get a question in Tynwald, the first one, you know the answer because you have it there. Then after that, and when I film it, you see certain MHKs have piles of potential. Where's it going to go on the next, rebuttal sort of thing? And that's coming from civil servants, right? Now, remember we had that whole thing about the buses in TT are all running to time because he read it out. But other people saying that can't be right. But how far down do you go by just believing somebody below you who's written this out for you?
Isn't that part of the problem with Tynwald at the moment, that far too much is being prepared in advance and read out? And I thought it was supposed to be a debating
It's scripted
chamber.
to some degree.
I didn't say script. I said advice and things like, can we agree, Mr. Moulton, as it was Mr. Moffatt earlier from somebody, can we agree, Mr. Moulton, that taking a decision like appointing somebody to the Ministry for Health and Social Care in the middle of what's obviously a health crisis, and I don't just mean the pandemic, I mean the fact that there's a strain on medicines at the moment, there's a strain on personnel, appointing somebody to that key position, you need to have input to it. Ultimately, of course, I'm not advocating that politically the decisions aren't made by the politicians, but you have a tier of senior civil servants, so they're competent. One of the things that I remember from the very fractious dealings I had with government over almost 30 years was most of the chief executives I dealt with were extremely competent. I don't know what the current situation is, but I'm pretty certain that there would have been advice from the likes of Fred Kissack when he was Chief Secretary to Miles Walker and those that he advised thereafter. I would have hoped the same for Will Greenhow, for the ministers that he subsequently advised. And I would expect Alf Cannon should have got the same advice from Coldrick. Maybe Alf is winging it. I don't know. Philip can ask him, or Andy Wint.
You do have the problem in that you've got Coldrick's the interim Chief Secretary, interim at Treasury, interim at Health, interim at Infrastructure. I think you've only got, was it Education and Enterprise have definitely got fixed. So you've got, I might have forgotten one there too, but you've got this problem across government where you've got a lot of interim people. Even there's the head of comms is still the interim head of comms. He's been in the job for 2-3 years. So it's sort of... I'm
going to sound racist, but when chief executives had names that sounded a bit more like Manx people, I think things were a lot better,
It's an interesting
point. If I keep coming and going, by the way, it's because Paul
keeps leaning back and I keep pulling him forward.
keeps grabbing me by the throat.
You're snoozing up there or something.
Have you phoned Alf and just offered your services? Because you seem to be gearing up. Legco's getting an election in February. You seem to be gearing up for something here.
Yeah.
I said to everyone, come on, put yourself up then.
I was once approached by somebody in this room to take a seat in Legco.
I didn't know you had that power, Paul.
I was going to say, not you or me then, so that only leaves one person.
Or at least have a stab for it. On the same day, I got another call from another MHK. That's how desperate they were at the time.
Why don't you put up?
It was the.
Why don't you do it? Why don't you stand there? Come on.
Well, why don't you, Paul?
Yeah, Paul.
I did try years ago.
Yeah, that's true.
For
I'm not quite
Christ's
sure
sake, I
it's
come up
me.
here to be critical of the government, and immediately I've got to run it. I told you. I told you down in the purple room that what my idea of. I'm not interested in democracy. Demagogy is.
He just wants to be in charge.
You're happy. You'll be happier with Alf. Actually, he's not a bad lad. I mean, if I met him, I'd buy him a pint.
Well, we've spent 40 minutes trawling through an unmemorable year. Have we got any predictions for the future? What's going to happen in 2023? I mean, I was speaking to a very prominent former politician who gave Alf Cannon's administration another 6 months before it would fall. Anyone got any similarly bold predictions?
Well, first of all, I think he's in it for his full term. I think he's, again, you look at the pack, who's going to be coming forward, and unless he stood down, I don't think there's going to be any sort of coup going on behind.
He's entitled to his full term. He's been elected.
Exactly.
I agree with you. I think it would be extremely churlish of members of the House of Keys in particular, who will stand for election eventually, to turn on him. If he decided he wanted to go, that's up to him. But as you say, he seems to indicate that he's quite happy to be there. I might not like what he's doing, but he went through the process. He stood for election. He then went through this, arguably twisted procedure we have for appointing a chief minister, and came out of the pack as the one that people wanted. He's got the right to be there, and he's got the right to expect a degree of support, even if it's critical support from the members of the Keys, and certainly from his cabinet. And if members of his cabinet are conspiring against them, he wants to execute them.
I haven't heard anyone is. I don't know if anyone has anyone actually heard that there's any conspiracy going on here.
I do think that Bernard is putting up a very strong case to be the new chief secretary, though.
You've got jobs coming at you left, right, and centre, Bernard.
I'm coming round to what Sam said. They should get round to appointing these the senior tier from interim positions to holding the post completely. And if Alf's comfortable with that guy who's running the Chief Secretary's office now, he should get him in post and get on with it. The last thing we want is another, pack of cards thrown up in the air and see what comes down. The government needs a bit of stability. Alf needs to stop jaunting off the island, not to mention MHK's bombing off on CPA jollies. That's a prediction for next year. They'll all be lining up holidays.
Yeah, I'm more worried about that one. These CPA things seem to be getting left, right, and centre, and I don't
it's
really
like a
know.
virus. It's worse than
Not
COVID.
sure. Everyone says it's all about contact, but I mean, really, what we haven't talked about is energy.
Yep.
And that's the crucial thing for all of us, sitting in a very nice warm studio here today. The electricity has been pegged for so long. That is reviewed in all April, isn't it?
No, it comes back. Dr. Anson's come back in January to
tell what's going to happen. But it goes until
March,
April, March. But I mean, and then you got the whole situation with gas and where that's all going and where the future is. These are the questions that people at home actually will be now listening to us, because they're concerned, like everyone, about heating their houses and where we're going to go.
Well, I mean, that's the thing. Obviously, while we sit here, and it will be the same when this goes out, Cura will be, if not yet, they will be very soon announcing what the gas price is going to be from January 1st. So we don't know if that's going to go up or down. The markets do seem to go up and down quite a bit as well. You'd hope it's going to go down, because that seems to be where the trend's going in the global market in recent weeks. But again, I mean, that's another one of these sort of things that we haven't really looked at. £26 million of public money to a public-owned company to be repaid by the customers, which is the public. Well, that was what Tim would authorise, but the chairman was in front of the select committee saying we can't guarantee that's going to be enough. And I mean, the MUA seems to be heading towards the same, not quite the same mess the MEA was in, but financially it's very difficult. And ultimately, I don't buy into that. By the way, this business about the MUA or MEA as it was, and all the rancour that went on when the new power station was built and the cable was put in. As somebody who worked for the Isle of Man Electricity Board about 50 odd years ago, and then somebody who represented power workers and so on, I can tell you the system in the Isle of Man up to about 15
20 years ago just would not have sustained what's sustained now, which is an uninterrupted supply and a good solid supply. And that took investment. You never heard me having a go at Mike Prophet, for example, who was at the MEA and got a lot of stick at that time. And I think one of the most positive things where government has found it's able to intervene, and here I do agree with you, is on the price of electricity and the tariff. And I do think that some of the money that Allinson's frittered around, given to this interest group and that interest group, and pandering to those in the Keys that could twist his arm, if that had gone more to the MUA, and instead of just fixing the tariff, they'd actually reduced it for the winter, they'd have done a lot more for people generally and businesses on the island.
But Bernard, it's just a loan. This is the whole thing we're talking about. We're paying this off in future generations.
I know, but the government have got to. The government did drive down the subvention on one occasion by giving a direct cash injection, and they should think about that now. Alan Bell made a good point. I always bring this up because I like Alan, he was a great chief minister. Alan Bell made a good point. When he first came into politics, he said the reserves of the Isle of Man government had were less than £1 million or something. Mm-hmm. They've got reserves these days. And for goodness sake, don't go on about pensions and all that, because most people don't know what the hell they're talking about when they talk about the subvention needed for pensions. They've got reserves at the present time, and they should use that to meet that loan, as you put it, and if needs be, go further. They haven't got the bottle to do anything about the gas company, but they could do something in electricity supply here to ensure that at least for probably an 18-month period, people have got a cushion of security in terms of energy supply here.
Well, of course, we also know...
I've run out of steam now.
Well, looking for...
We were waiting for that.
Well, looking forward, of course, you do have to think of that if you look at the area plan for the north and the west, there's talk there of something power related in the north, which possibly indicates towards where the new interconnector is going to come in. Pool Rose has got a life in it up to about 10 years, probably shorter than that. You're looking at the end of this decade. So, we have to look into this of how the government's going to resolve that issue, which is going to cost more money into the thing, because ultimately we have a publicly owned power company. So that to me is an interesting one, is what we're going to see in the next year around energy.
Okay, you were talking about the situation with £1 million in reserves all those years ago. We've got the big reserves now. What is interesting is we're into the banks. The Isle of Man government went into the money markets and have loans from commercial banks. We do have now a situation where there's debt that's going to be serviced, and with interest rates going up and all this sort of thing, and the future where we're going with this.
Well, Phil will have called to give you advice about that and what the interest rates are and so on. It might be been borrowed at a low interest rate, in which case with rising interest rates, actually the Isle of Man government is probably in pocket from it. I don't know. I'm not a fiscal genius.
Here's my prediction for next year. Taxes are going to go up. I think we're being softened up by Dr. Allison at the minute. I think there's almost certainly, and I can't prove it, but I've had it from more than one source, but obviously we, Jersey and Guernsey, will all move together on one of the rates. I'm assuming it won't be on the 20%, but you never know. But that's the only way the Isle of Man can start, and the other jurisdictions can start clawing back some of this money.
Well, some people can afford to pay more tax, and
they're here because it's low tax.
Well,
that's the problem.
The government needs, if the government is going to go down that road. I mean, I'm one of the ones who moans on about tax all the time, but if the government's going to go down that road, it needs to look at the balance between whether it's going to squeeze the middle, as Allinson puts it, or whether it's going to spread the load further up the food chain. But if that's just the sort of thing they've got to do, well, again, Cannon has got to get into it and get on with it.
Sam, I mean, you will have read the documents, no doubt, the government plan in relation to tax. And actually, one of the things that's in there is a recognition that there's not enough personal tax paid on the island. Well, no, sorry, it was the other way around. It's primarily personal tax and not enough sort of corporation tax or business-related tax.
I think that it'll be an interesting challenge, that one, actually, because overwhelming amount of tax on the island comes in from personal. I mean, you have the 010 set up around banking. I think you'll probably see a gradual introduction towards larger companies paying some form of business tax on the island. People aren't, realistically, I don't think there's anything to gain from going round and starting, small coffee shops where they've got 5 staff, or independent business where they've got 2 or 3 people. That is going to benefit nobody if they start charging tax there. Ultimately, on the rest of us, I think income tax is probably going to go up in some form or other. It's still going to be lower than the UK, but it's another hit into people's pockets.
And isn't this the whole thing about attracting people to the man? I just know so many people are leaving. It's just, I've never seen anything like it. This is the 30-year-olds who have been, maybe come back after whatever. But if you don't have that advantage to be here, it's scary, because we all know that Paul, the MLC and his graphs showing all this massive way to the top. The old people like you and me, Bernard, old people, and there's not enough young people feeding into the system. And this must worry Dr. Allison when he looks at
Are you allowing ageism in here?
well, sadly, we are almost out of time. So, Bernard, you've sat quietly for most of the programme. Do you have a final sort of flourish that you could give us in relation to what you think the future holds?
Because you said you wanted somebody to serve them in pies, and I had to substitute when Doug Stamper didn't turn up. No, looking ahead, I think the government, the current government, as I said before, it's got to keep its nerve. And Cannon, like him or loathe him, I'm a bit ambivalent about that, but he's there for a session. It would be most disappointing if some of the predictions that have been bandied around here, that people are saying he might come to pass, because then you're going to have Tynwald internalising again for another 6 or 7 months at a time when the island needs a bit of stability. And I think the real impact of this winter will only become apparent round about the time that Allinson is standing up to give his budget in 10 or 12 weeks into the new year. I think then we'll know how people have withstood the winter. And I don't think gimmicks like topping up benefits a little bit and having warm spaces where you can go and watch a film once every 2 weeks or something is really going to help people. I think the government have got to ensure, not just coming out of this bad winter, but going into the next one, because I think this will go on for at least 18 months, that they have a coherent plan in place. I sincerely hope they have. I mean, I'm getting to the point where I might not be around anyway.
And on that note, I wish you all a happy new year.